Hello, my friends. Let's start with the fact that foreign media have already begun openly stating that Ukraine and the United States still failed to reach an agreement, and therefore the deal hasn't been signed. No progress was made on the territorial issue during negotiations between Ukraine and the US. ABC News reports. It is also claimed that Russia is not ready to discuss a ceasefire on the front lines, while Ukraine is not willing to make territorial concessions. In this way, it's clear that the war will continue. But Zelensky said that it might still be possible to achieve an outcome that works for Ukraine, Europe, and the United States.
We may be able to achieve exactly what is necessary for Ukraine, for Europe, and also, I am certain, for America and for the long-term interests of the democratic world.
Kuleba also said that today Ukraine is standing on the threshold of a very serious choice.
If this doesn't happen, meaning if no agreement is reached, even one that no one will like, but that would record this situation of a tactical defeat and a strategic victory, then the war will continue for many years. Things will stay as they are, and even get worse, because they won't stop. They have resources, and we won't stop, because we also have resources. But the front line will keep moving, moving every year. And this is the choice that Ukrainian society is facing right now. What should we do? Acknowledge the truth and try to stop this? Or continue believing that something will somehow drastically change and just keep going? That's where we are right now.
And by the way, new statements are coming from Putin. He has once again ordered the creation of a buffer zone on the border with Ukraine. Russia needs to create a so-called security zone along the border with Ukraine in the area of responsibility of the North Group, Putin said during a meeting. In practice, this means an attempt to expand control over border areas of the Kharkiv, Sumy, and Chernihiv regions. The Russian dictator also stated that the battlefield situation is a tragedy for the Ukrainian people. So that's there is not even any discussions on the Russian side about planning to stop. They are only discussing where they intend to move next. And today, the problems on the front are not getting any smaller. Let's start with the Kostyantynivka direction. Here, the Russians are storming Protechne, the outskirts of Kostyantynivka, Pleshiivka, Klebanbyk, and are pushing forward beyond Rusin Yar. At the same time, the Ukrainian side has denied reports of a Russian breakthrough in the area of Verolyubivka. For now, the front line here remains unchanged. In the Dobropillia direction, the Russians are assaulting Bilitske, Dorozhny, Nove Shachove, and Sofiivka from two sides already. The situation here is getting worse, and the gray zone is expanding. But for now, the Ukrainian forces are destroying the Russians and are preventing them from gaining a foothold. In the Pokrovsk direction, it's clear that Pokrovsk is under the Russian control, and now the Ukrainian forces are destroying them there with drones. The Russians are also assaulting Rodinske, Mirnograd, the village of Rih, Grishine, and are pushing toward Serhiivka. Based on video footage from Ukrainian soldiers, it has already been confirmed that the Russians have once again managed to break into the village of Rivne, and they've also been spotted in the northern part of the city of Rodinske. Pokrovsk direction, Deep State has published new footage confirming Russian positions in the area. In particular, it was confirmed that the Russians are infiltrating Rivne. A gray zone was added there a few weeks ago. The Russians are also advancing toward the railway line south of Rodenske. Logistics in Myrnograd rely exclusively on drones. So essentially, if logistics depend only on drones, the Ukrainian forces cannot enter or exit the city. And this means that Myrnograd is effectively fully encircled. But the fight continues. In fact, if we go back 3 years when drones weren't used the way they are today, this situation would have been 100% a full encirclement, and the Ukrainian forces would have had no options. But today, thanks to drones, ammunition is being delivered, and the unit there continues to repel Russian attacks. And now let's move on to the Novopavlivka direction. Here, the Russians continue storming the city and are pushing toward Filia. They're also advancing in the area of Ivanivka and near the village of Tolstoy. But for now, all attacks there are being repelled and the front line remains unchanged. In the direction of the settlement of Pokrovske in the Dnipropetrovsk region, the Russians are trying to break through near Sosnivka, Novoalexandrivka, and Yegorivka, and they also carried out shelling. However, there have been no changes over the past 24 hours, and the Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Huliaipole direction, the Russians are pushing through near the village of Solotke and assaulting Preluki, Varvarivka, and Huliaipole. And Putin asked what the further plans were for this area.
How do you see the situation developing further?
Going forward, Comrade Commander-in-Chief, the key goal will be to defeat the enemy on the left bank of the Haika River, so we can continue our advance westward within the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions, as well as seize the Huliaipole defensive district centered in the city of Huliaipole.
As we can see, the Russians are not saying that the war will stop if an agreement is signed. Instead, they're already planning how they will keep moving forward, including into the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions. On the Zaporizhia front, no new assaults have been reported so far, and the front line remains unchanged. On the Kherson front, the Russians continue shelling, but no offensive actions are taking place. Now let's move to the Siversk direction. Here, the Russians continue assaulting Dronivka and Siversk, but they have had no success, and the front line remains unchanged. The Ukrainian forces have managed to stabilize the situation somewhat. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are attacking Zarychne, Novoselivka, and Korovy Yar, but here as well, Russia has achieved no new successes, and the front line remains unchanged, although Lyman is under a heavy number of strikes with many Russian FPV drones operating. It's clear that they're aiming to capture the city in the near future. In the Borova direction, the Russians are assaulting Novoyegorivka and Chernyshina. Here, the activity has begun to decrease, and they haven't achieved any major successes. For now, the front line remains unchanged. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are not conducting any new assaults today. At the same time, Putin claims that Kupiansk is completely captured, while Zelensky said that the city has been fully cleared of Russians.
There are tough battles in Pokrovsk itself and in other directions. For example, Our forces have had more success in the Kupiansk direction, even though Russia says it has captured Kupiansk, while we, to be honest, have cleared almost everyone from the city.
Ukrainian Armed Forces fighters also report that they're making progress in the city. Over the past 10 days, our defenders have significantly cleared the city. It even reached the point where infiltration routes for small Russian groups were partially blocked. Most of the fighting has now shifted to the northern part of the city, where the battles for Kupiansk originally began. At the same time, clearing operations continue in the central part of the city. Recently, the appendix in the southwest part, where many Russian forces had gathered during stages 2-3 of the offensive, was almost completely cleared. The Russians had planned to advance from there to the crossing leading to Kupiansk-Uzlovy, which would have completely isolated our Kupiansk garrison from the main forces. In reality, this entire direction was hanging by a thread, because isolating the Kupiansk garrison wouldn't have been the only problem. Our defenders on the left bank of the Oskil River would also have been encircled. But the Russians failed to implement this plan. Now the most difficult task remains clearing high-rise buildings in the northern part of the city and finally blocking Russian infiltration routes. Currently, the city is approximately 50 or 60% under the control of the defense forces, with about 20% remaining as a gray zone. Overall, we are waiting to see how events will develop in this direction. In the Velykyi Burluk direction, all attacks have stopped and the Russians haven't been able to advance. In Vovchansk, fighting continues, but the situation is worsening as the gray zone is expanding significantly. In addition, the Russians are assaulting the village of Lyman, but here as well, the Ukrainian forces are actively destroying them and preventing them from establishing new positions. On the Sumy front, no new assaults have been reported so far, and the situation has stabilized. However, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Putin once again stated that they will create a buffer zone, so it's clear that new attacks are possible here. Meanwhile, the White House says that they remain optimistic about ending the war. The administration is very optimistic. The entire president's team, including Special Envoy Witkov, Secretary Rubio, the Vice President, the President himself, and Secretary Hexet, have been working so hard on this, and they all genuinely want this war to end. Just yesterday, they had very good talks with the Ukrainians in Florida, and now Special Envoy Witkov is heading to Russia. Levitt added that the White House is engaged in shuttle diplomacy and talking on equal terms with both sides. We have put the points on paper. These points were very well coordinated, but as for the details, let the negotiators handle that. Still, we feel quite good and hope that this war will finally end. And Kaja Kallas said that the US will put pressure on the weaker side, meaning Ukraine, to end the war. I'm afraid that all the pressure will be placed on the victim. Ukraine will be forced to make concessions and commitments. I fear that all the pressure will fall on the weaker side because it's the easier way to stop the war if Ukraine gives in. But this is not in anyone's interest, not Ukraine's, not the European Union's, and not in the interest of global collective security, because the UN Charter says that borders cannot be changed by force. But Zelensky stated that work is underway to ensure that a third Russian invasion of Ukrainian territory doesn't happen.
We are working to guarantee that Russia's third invasion will definitely not occur and that there will be no breakdown of any agreement to end the war. Russia has broken its promises so many times, violated all treaties, and it is very easy for them to sabotage peace. That's why reliable security guarantees are needed for Ukraine, for all of us.
Friends, make sure to share your thoughts about this in the comments. And that's all from me, so please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.